Welcome to the Advanced Sports Analytics Show here on RotoGrinders. I'm Jordan Cooper, aka Blenderhead, aka Blender HD, aka hopefully on top of you of the GPP leaderboards this coming Sunday on DraftKings. Join with me, as always, the man behind the model at Advanced Sports Analytics. It's Stuart Gibson. And for last week, did you stack enough of the Chiefs and the Buccaneers game and Derrick Henry? It seemed like you need Tyreek, you need Henry, and I didn't have enough Henry, so I didn't get there.
Yeah, no, I did not. I stacked the Chiefs Buccaneers a decent bit, but a lot of Kelsey and Watkins, not Hill. The data suggested that maybe the return of Sammy Watkins could temper, I guess, expectations for Hill. That turned out not to be the case.
It turned out to be the complete opposite of the case.
Right. I did not heed your words of advice on being high on Henry when the field is expecting to be low. I did min cash with a Baker, Landry, Hooper, James Robinson stack. So
you had
that
to
was
throw
actually...
that in. You had to throw the Browns into one lineup.
Yeah, that actually probably was my best of about 10 tournament lineups on Sunday. So yeah, all in all, pretty bad Sunday and just general week for me. So hoping to rebound this week. Pretty messy slate, I think, so far. Not a whole lot of high total games. The games that, the teams, I guess, that have high implied totals also have significant blowout risk and, I think somewhat suspect opportunities to bring back. So, yeah, looking forward to discussing it with you and, hopefully getting a little more clarity because right now it's looking a little messy so far.
Well, you mentioned that fact. I wanted to bring that up. We have totals everywhere from 42.5 at the low, 53.5 at the high, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 5 teams that are more than a touchdown favorite. You mentioned before that we typically in GPPs are targeting shootouts, targeting games where both teams are playing fast, scoring points. The game is being sped up, and both teams go over their total. So that's why you make a 3+1 stack, or 2+1 skinny stack. Quarterback, wide receiver, opposing wide receiver. Quarterback, 2 pass catches, opposing player. Do you think on this type of slate, where we have 5 teams that are expected, at least by the betting public, to have a significant chance of not necessarily blowing out their opponent, but scoring substantially more than their opponent, that this could be a week, because we have multiple of them, that maybe we don't make as many bring back type of stacks? Maybe because we have, like, to just go through it. We'll go through the top total games soon enough. But we got the Dolphins, we got the Seahawks, we got the Packers, we got the Raiders, and we got the Vikings that are all touchdown or better favorites. They all have individually high implied totals, but their opponents don't. So do you think that a viable construction for GPP, especially if a lot of the field are going to try to stack these games, to just let me look at those 5 teams and let me take the one-off pieces that work in those games, or even double? So, for instance, playing a 3+0 of one game and then 2 pieces of another game where that team blows the other team out without a correlated piece.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be viable, and I think it's going to be on a team-by-team basis. I mean, so much of the show we spend discussing correlations within a specific team. I think it's a good week to pay attention to how players that we want to stack up on a winning side tend to correlate with, cumulative scoring of the opposition. So I think in previous weeks, we had talked about a Fitzpatrick week, a while back, and discussed how, like, he doesn't really have that strong cross-game correlation with opposing offenses. Like, he has a essentially neutral, a slightly negative correlation with the cumulative scoring of the opponent's offense, as where a guy like Russ Wilson, has this big, positive +4/5 correlation I think paying attention to which players correlate neutrally or negatively with the opposition could be, a way to target certain teams that we are feeling comfortable about not bringing back any players on the other side, and teams that have this strong positive correlation with the opposition, meaning that when player X, let's say Russell Wilson, scores well or puts up a lot of fantasy points, it typically positively correlates. It gives a higher likelihood of the opposing offense as a whole scoring some above norm or above average total. So like that's an example of a team that I might be, or a side where I'd be a little hesitant to avoid bringing someone back because if Russ is going to get there, it gives you kind of elevated confidence that maybe the opposition as a whole is going to get there as well. A guy like Fitzpatrick, who has this neutral or negative correlation, historically has had routes to having kind of above average games for himself, where the opposition doesn't have any higher or any lower confidence in that opposition achieving some ceiling outcome as a whole. So I think something could be useful to pay attention to this week. And maybe as we're talking through some of these high spread games, I can try to pull up the correlation that some of the key pieces have with opposing offenses or opposing wide receivers to get a sense if that is a route that we should be, we should feel confident in taking. That naked or kind of no bring back, not naked, but no bring back route. I can try to pull that up quickly and add that for context to get a sense if that's something we want to deploy with the specific team that we're discussing.
Well, a route that you should be taking is playing the FanDuel single entry series. It's the last week. What are you waiting for? I mean, we've been doing this for the past, this is the past 7 weeks. If you haven't gotten in already, well, you can't go to the final, the 6-man 20K final, but still you can compete in single entry contests in 3 buy-in levels: $5, $33, $100. They're flat payout structures, low rake. So check that out. FanDuel single entry series. It's the last week to get in before the end of the season. So let's start with we don't have we have 3 games that are 50 plus, but then we have a bunch that are at like 47, 48. So I mean, we'll start at the top, but once I saw this total, 53.5, it's up from 52. The Titans, 29.75 implied total. The Browns, 24.25 total. Stewart, it's a Browns game with the highest total. Like, how are you not going to be playing Baker Mayfield plus Jarvis Landry plus Austin Hooper on this slate? Or are we concerned? I could see the field. I could see these are teams where their running backs, vulture. I don't want to call vulture. I mean, Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt. The Browns are the most run heaviest team in the league. The Titans, Derrick Henry, if he's going, like, their passing volume is going to be lower. It's the highest total on the slate, though. So compared to ownership, like, I think the passing games in this contest are going to be much lower owned than what we'd expect out of the highest total game. But I mean, is that warranted?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think I was kind of surprised looking at the lineup HQ and projected ownership for this game. I kind of expected there to be high ownership projections like somewhere on this game. I mean, especially the Tennessee side, we have them as the second most likely team to score the most points, and it seemed like Henry isn't projected for super high ownership. Like Tannehill is projected for exceptionally low ownership. I mean, towards the middle or bottom even of kind of quarterback ownership. And yeah, I mean, just given the total of this game, I don't see how no one on this game gets there. I mean, I think I would suspect, just because they are the favored team, Henry will probably be the more popular play. And if that's the case, I think, as you discussed last week, if you are concerned that the field is going to be high on Henry, it's a good week to be low on him. If you suspect that the field will be low on Henry, good week to be high on him. So, I think that rule makes sense to me. And such, yeah, I mean, I think the Tennessee passing side seems fairly appealing. I mean, the case against playing the Browns this week is that, like, sure, they're in the highest total game, but they're also a pretty low implied total. I mean, we have them as only a 3.2% chance of scoring the most points on the slate. And as I've kind of discussed all along, there are major ceiling concerns for this Browns passing side. So when you combine a team, a passing attack that really doesn't have much of a ceiling, has a pretty low implied total, even if they are projected to play from behind, like I'm not convinced that that's going to really help. Mayfield, Landry, Hooper, I think would probably be the natural stack. Like they just don't have much of a ceiling. So like even if they do achieve kind of their relative ceiling due to game script, like it's not a very high ceiling. So I guess I'm not really that intrigued on the Cleveland side.
Well, I think that the ownership of this game is lower because of the pricing. I mean, we have
Yeah,
Derrick Henry at 9,200, AJ Brown at 7,600. Corey Davis is more manageable at 5,100. The tight
right.
ends could be anything at this point. Jonnu Smith was big early in the year, and now he's barely seeing targets. Swaim is out targeting him. And then on the Cleveland side, I mean, Chubb and Hunt like just take so much of the work. I think it's not necessarily a byproduct of like the field going like, I don't want to take the high total game. It's just that
It's priced up.
individually, do these players have a ceiling at their prices? Yeah, AJ Brown, you can get there on big plays, but I mean his volume is pretty low. He doesn't see double digit targets. We have Derrick Henry, at 9,200. If he doesn't see the end zone twice, like he doesn't get 30 points. You're going to need 30 points at 9,200. So I think the ownership is more of a byproduct of the salaries because there are games that are just slightly lower totals that have much more appealing salaries that regardless of if this turns into a shootout, it's quite possible that this game could go to a 55, 60 point total. And like none of these pieces are necessary in GPPs.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think the price of AJ Brown makes it somewhat tough to double stack. I mean, Brown and Davis, I think, would be the natural stack on the Tennessee side, but I mean, their combined ceiling has only been about 40, it's been like 46 fantasy points, which, I think at Davis's price point, like his ceiling, that kind of combined ceiling is manageable from a Davis standpoint. But yeah, Brown is just so expensive. I think like both those guys in combination with one another is going to be really tough to, um, manage as part of a double stack. So like, I have 46 ceiling on those two guys combined. They essentially have neutral correlation. It's like 0 if you round to the second decimal place. But their price combined is 12.7. So 46 points for 12.7 in salary is 3.5x. Like it's just a somewhat low ceiling for a combination of players at a fairly elevated price, mostly due to AJ Brown's pricing. So I don't know. I think it would be a tough game to like double stack up, and I do wonder if maybe it's a good opportunity to just grab like single pieces or maybe just a single piece from the Tennessee side and try to build through a different kind of core stack. But I mean, it's not a game I'd necessarily want to like avoid completely because it's a strong total. There are like I do think Corey Davis is pretty reasonably priced. So there are I think plays to be had. But I do have concerns about it being a game where you can kind of get a lot of plays from the game at a reasonable price point.
Well, moving on to the next game on the docket. It's 52.5 total. It's up 3 points since open. It's the Vikings at home against the Jaguars. The Vikings with a 31.5 implied team total. The Jaguars with a 21 implied team total. The Vikings have one of, if not the most condensed offense in the NFL. You have Cook, you have Thielen, who should be back from the COVID list. You have Jefferson. Rudolph there as a tight end. Irv Smith is questionable. Obviously, you have Cousins in the passing game. On the Jaguars, you have a workhorse in James Robinson. And then we have to see whether or not Chark or Conley are back, because there'll always be cheap Jaguars pieces in the receiving game. But with a 31.5 implied total, I'm going to assume that the Vikings are at the top of your stack probability list. And with the fact that it essentially, like, it seems like 90% plus of their production goes through 3 players. If you're not stacking the Vikings, how are you not having at least one Viking in like every lineup that you make?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they are showing up as, the most likely team to top the slate, 15.3%, and that's a solid, 4% ahead of the next competitor, which is Tennessee. So, yeah, I mean, I think you're going to need to get at least one of these Vikings guys, and like you said, pretty high confidence that some mix of Thielen, Cook, and Jefferson, and that could be, one of those guys, could be two of those guys. It seems like a long shot for it to be all 3 guys, but I mean, Minnesota just have to put a mass total for, the production to come through some permutation of those 3 guys. I think the challenge is going to be trying to figure out which ones, because the price on Jefferson has come up and we really haven't seen any reduction on Thielen, even though I missed last week. It's a tough, game to double stack up with like Jefferson plus Thielen. Their max, it's kind of similar situation to Brown and Davis, except I think there's just more balance in term and more kind of uncertainty as to who is, the most likely to score the most points between Jefferson and Thielen. But it's tough. I mean, their combined total, they have slight negative correlation through 10 games this year. It's only 54.7, and price wise, what do they combine for salary wise? I mean, what was that, 14.2? It's a tough double stack to feel like you can get to some massive ceiling. I mean, their combined ceiling divided by their combined price, is only 3.8x. It's tough. I think you would like, out of, if you are going to double stack up a game, prefer to get 4 to 5x out of that combined receiver stack. And I think that's going to be tough to do with both of these pass catchers as part of a double stack. So it might be a spot to either single, if you do want to go Cousins, just pick one of Thielen or Jefferson, or maybe if you're going to go the double stack route, maybe consider going Thielen or Jefferson plus Rudolph plus Cousins. Because yeah, I mean, like I think the price tag on Cousins is reasonable. It's a game with a high total. There are some compelling bring back options. I think James Robinson would probably be the first place I would go, even though it's a game that Jacksonville is projected to play from behind. I think if Cousins to Thielen or Cousins to Jefferson is to really achieve their ceiling, you're going to need kind of someone on the Jacksonville side to keep it competitive. And I think, we saw last week with Cleveland, like Jacksonville and also James Robinson factors in the passing game. So I don't think, a negative game script like totally X's him out. But you saw last week with Cleveland. I mean, Cleveland was a projected favorite and the game was more competitive than expected because James Robinson kind of was single-handedly able to keep it competitive. And it forced Cleveland to be a little more pass heavy than, we would expect from them if they were up, 2 scores for most of the game. So I think that probably would be the route I'd like to take on this game. Cousins plus 1 receiver, James Robinson back, or Cousins plus 1 receiver plus Rudolph. I do think it's going to be a bit tough to go, Cousins, Thielen, Jefferson. Does that seem reasonable, or is that kind of a
No, I mean,
pricing?
it could, I mean, it can work. I mean, typically I don't like playing 2 receivers that are around 7K.
Yeah.
Together, because then their ceilings become negatively correlated. The more interesting part of this game is that Dalvin Cook is projected to be one of the highest owned running backs, coming off of a pretty dud game last week, but the running back pool this week is relatively weak. We have some somewhat underpriced wide receivers. Most people will probably not be paying up at tight end. So fitting Cook in shouldn't be as much of a problem. But at 9,500, obviously, it's the same thing as Derrick Henry. Like, he's got to find the end zone twice. He's got to put up 30-plus points at 9,500. The more interesting thing here in this game, like, I'm more likely, if I'm not worried about Cousins, maybe I do play some Cousins stacks, but I think if I'm playing 100 lineups, like, I have one Viking in every line. I mean, like I'll set a rule so I get at least Cook, Jefferson, Thielen in one of my, no matter how it comes out, the team has a 31.5 implied total. The thing that I'm wondering is playing Cook and Robinson in the same lineup together, because typically opposing running backs are negatively correlated to each other, ceiling wise. But because if the Vikings are up, they typically are going to start getting way run heavy, right? If the best piece on the Jacksonville side is James Robinson, like, we're talking about, like, how many plays are going to be run this game if James Robinson is touching the ball 25 times and Dalvin Cook is touching the ball 30 times? Like, am I getting enough correlation from the game environment to play Cook and Robinson together? Or should I side with the fact that historically opposing running backs just like eat into each other's ceiling just because the clock's moving too much?
Yeah, I mean, I think the data would suggest that it would be tough to go Robinson plus Cook. I mean, we have a pretty significant sample on Cook, and he's had essentially zero correlation with opposing running back units. So, it's not so negative that you'd just be like, well, you can't do it, but you're not really getting, I think, added confidence in, the opposing running backs is seeding. Robinson, we only have a 10-game sample, but in those 10 games, he's had a negative 0.38 correlation with opposing running back units. I think small sample, and it's not like such a massive number where, you just say like, oh, well, if Cook does good, there's no way Robinson can do well.
But you'd
But if we
side
had,
against it. I mean, negative
yeah,
0.38 is strong enough that,
it's pretty
like,
strong. Yeah.
Robinson correlates better with Jefferson or Thielen than with Cook.
Yeah. Here I could pull up, let's see, Robinson's correlation with opposing receivers and also opposing quarterbacks. I'm kind of just curious to see that. Robinson with opposing quarterback plus 0.63. Robinson with opposing receiver units negative 0.174. So strong correlation with opposing quarterbacks, slightly negative to neutral correlation with opposing receivers. I don't know. I mean, I think like by going Cousins plus Jefferson or Cousins plus Thielen, you're getting natural leverage off of Cook. And then by playing Robinson on the other side, like, I think Robinson also has some, like we discussed, like negative correlation and leverage properties against Cook as well. So to me, that build seems to be well structured towards just, and if Cook is going to be highly owned, which I think seems reasonably likely given the weakness of the running back position, you're just getting a build that I think is really highly differentiated from a lot of the builds that are probably just going to be Cook no Robinson, or Cook no Jefferson, or Cook no Thielen, or Cook no Cousins kind of thing. I don't know. To me, that seems like a highly leveraged approach to a side that has pretty good implied total. And I do like Robinson. Just he's got a ton of volume working for him, and the fact that he positively correlates with opposing QBs and has kind of neutral correlation with receivers, I think is also a somewhat desirable property for this type of build.
Okay, next game on the docket, we got one of our favorite teams, the team that you can't possibly stack, or it's seemingly you can't. You normally, who knows who you stack them with? It's a 51 total. It's actually down from its open. It opened at 53. It's down to 51. It's the Colts at the Texans. The Colts with a 27.25 implied total. The Texans with a 23.75 implied total. It's a 51 total game. The Colts, how do you stack? They have three. They're going to have three running backs. They have 5 wide receivers. They have 3 tight ends. And then we have the Texans, who figure on this slate to be the most owned team on the slate with only a 23.75 implied total. And this is going to be a byproduct of salary and the fact that Will Fuller got suspended for 6 games, which will basically should open up targets for the rest of the Texans passing game. They're playing indoors. The Colts defense, I mean, they got shredded by the Titans, so I'm not scared of them. Do you think that it's warranted? I mean, we could talk about the Colts. It probably comes up very high in your stack probability, but it's just like, what are the players that the team gets there, but none of the players do? But what are your thoughts on the fact that the most popular team on the slate is nowhere near to the highest extent of? I mean, I'm going to assume the Texans don't come up high to you. Is this the type of thing where the median for the Texans, for Watson, for Cooks, for QT, for Akins, for Duke Johnson, look good in projections? Like they're a very good shot at hitting their median, but their ceilings are suspect because of the implied point total.
Yeah, I mean, I think Cooks or QT are priced low enough where there is some ceiling to be had, I guess, for one of those guys. But I mean, I think it's a spot to just take, if you want to, you definitely don't need to apply some rule like you suggested with the Vikings where, get one of Cooks, QT, or Akins. But yeah, I think this is a spot where I'd be content to just take one of those guys and then move on. I mean, I think you guys have Watson projected as the highest or one of the highest quarterbacks. And yeah, I mean, his price hasn't come way down really with Fuller out. And I mean, the guy just lost his best receiving target, his best receiver. Seems like there probably is some reduction in kind of ceiling. And Fuller's like a great ceiling receiver. So yeah, and I mean, I'm a little suspect of just trying to stack through Watson and just build up big on the Houston side. Like it's a low total. I do, the Colts got shredded last week, but they've been a pretty solid defense for most of the season. I think it could be reasonable to just take kind of the long form on that. Yeah,
I mean, we take a look at ownership currently right now. I know it's Thursday, so this will change. We have Watson at 11.2% projected owned. We have Brandon Cooks at 29.4% projected owned. And we have Jordan Akins, the cheap tight end, at 17.3 projected owned. So you combine that all together, it could easily be that 7 or 8% of total lineups in a contest in large field GPPs, and maybe even more in single entry and 3-max, are a Watson, Cooks, Akins stack. And with them being so much significantly less of an implied point total, I mean, to me, this is an easy, I don't play the stack, maybe play the piece is fine. You want to play one-offs? That's perfectly fine. But even then, if Cooks, I think, could get there without Watson. I think the thing about playing the one-offs in this stack, Cooks, Akins, stuff like that, QT, is that Watson's 7,500. So Cooks could get there and Watson could not get. Watson could end up with 22 points. And it's okay, I could fade 22 points and Cooks still ends up with 30, right? Cooks has a game where it's 10 for 140 and a touchdown. And Watson still only has, 260 yards passing and 2 touchdowns. And he's sitting there with 20 points. It's okay, I don't need that. He's 7,500, so that doesn't pay. It's not like he's a 5K quarterback. So 22 is good. So typically I don't like playing one-offs of the chalkiest stack. But I think in this occasion, with Watson's price being up there, that I still think these receivers could hit a ceiling without the quarterback coming along with them. But still, it's kind of Am I going to play a 30% own Brandon Cooks?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I think the stack is an easy fade. I think, like you said, like I do think Cooks could get there. There's a lot of value that has been opened up by the absence of Will Fuller, and neither Cooks nor Coutie's price have come way up. So yeah, I think there are just pretty good routes to any one of these receivers getting there from a value standpoint. And then at 7.5 Watson not getting there. So I will probably have some Brandon Cooks. It's not like a guy I think I'll take a strong position on one way or the other, but I definitely don't want to full X him out because I'm not interested in the Watson stack. I think there are plenty of routes where he or Kuti, Akins, because he's so touchdown dependent, maybe a little less interest in. But I definitely think there are routes to Cooks and Kuti getting there where Watson doesn't. And with that in
How
mind,
about the other side of the game? I mean, what the hell do you do with the Colts? They're
Yeah.
the favorite teams with the higher implied total, and all I'm looking at going, Michael
Yeah.
Pittman. I mean, what am I doing?
Yeah, I don't know. Pittman probably is the most sensible route. Yeah, I
Yeah, I
don't I
know,
don't
right?
know.
You're
That's
speechless
this
because I
Indianapolis
don't.
side.
What are you supposed to do?
I mean, if Akins is going to be super popular and people are going to go like Watson, Cooks, Akins, going like Burton Cooks or Burton Coutii. I mean, I don't love that, but it certainly would be kind of leveraged against what maybe a popular build might be. I don't know.
Okay, let's
But
go.
yeah,
Let's go to other teams. We're not going to go to other games because those were the 50 plus total games. Now we're going to go towards the teams that have the high implied totals, but the other side of the game. We have like the Seahawks, for instance. Seahawks have a 28 implied total. I'm assuming in your probability tool, they're going to be up there. The Giants have only an 18 implied total. The Seahawks are a 10-point favorite in a 46 total game. Lockett and Metcalf are both now quite expensive. I mean, we're
yeah,
we're seeing the 8,200, 7,400. I know they positively correlate with each other and Wilson, but like I can't possibly double stack them.
no.
Uh, and then you look at the Giants side and go, is there anyone worth bringing it back? Like this is one of those games where, like, can the Seahawks just run them over 35-3? And if I get just the right pieces, do I need a correlated, player from the other side of the game?
So, in my opinion, it's a spot to try to find someone on the other side. I think a combination of, like we mentioned at the top of the show, Russ having this positive correlation with the opposition means that, correlation is never causal. So you can't say like Russ doing well causes the opposition to do well, or the opposition to do, opposition doing well causes Russ to do well. They're just correlated. But yeah, I mean, because there is that positive correlation, uh, Russ doing well or the opposition doing well gives us increased confidence that the other side of that pair is going to do well. And if the opposition fails massively, you kind of have reduced confidence in Russ reaching some relative ceiling. I think also there's been good documentation about how the Seattle's kind of pass heavy approach has been waning over the course of the season. It seems like we might be returning to an offense more similar to 2019, where like if Seattle's up by a lot, they're going to run the ball, and they got Chris Carson back, a running back who Pete Carroll seems to really like. For me, this is a spot where if I were going to go like Russ plus Metcalf or Russ plus Lockett, probably would want to try to find a guy on the New York side to bring back. I think Ingram or Shepard probably the most likely candidates. Be interesting to see if Daniel Jones plays or not. I think that's kind of an important factor. Like if Jones doesn't play and it's McCoy, it almost seems like this total is reflective of Jones not expected to play. But I'm not 100% sure on that. So you guys have Colt as in lineup HQ. So like, if that's the case, I think a combination of Seattle being expensive and just really limited confidence in the Giants side, it might be and there is kind of, because of that, there's high blowout risk. It might be a game I'd be inclined to be underweight on. I don't know. So that, what do you think about that approach? Are you considering Seattle as just no bring back, or?
Well, it depends. It depends. To me, it depends if Daniel Jones plays.
Yeah.
If Daniel Jones plays, then I have a little bit more interest. But to me, the run back is more like Evan Ingram to fill a tight end spot.
Sure.
To do that instead of playing Shepard or Slayton. But I mean, that's not that out of the high total teams, Seattle is actually my least. The one that I'm looking at the least, just due to ownership. I'm looking at now we're going to get into the ones that I want to play. Okay. It's a 47 total. It's come down a half a point. The Packers are 9-point favorites over the Eagles, who look horrible. The Packers have a 28 implied total. The Eagles have a 19 implied total. I'm looking right in lineup HQ right now. Aaron Rodgers is under 7K. He's 6,800. He's 4% owned. Devontae Adams is 9K, and he's 8% projected owned. Most people are not going to pay up for wide receiver to that extent. They're going to play Dalvin Cook. They're going to play Derrick Henry instead of playing Devontae Adams. Why aren't I just playing Rodgers and Adams and just winning it all?
Yeah, I mean, that seems like a solid approach. Those guys have really strong correlation. If Rodgers does well, you have pretty good confidence that Adams is going to do well as well. So is that a game you are thinking you're going to want to bring someone back?
The Eagles are horrible. Who do I bring back on the Eagles? They throw it at 7 million people. Travis Fulgham, Alshon Jeffrey. They're trotting Alshon Jeffrey out there. He runs. I run faster than him. Like this is what I mean by in the beginning of the show, where I'm like, I could find places where, like, if the Packers put up 4 to 5 touchdowns, like, what do I care about the Eagles? I mean, like, what? I mean, really, what does it matter if Devontae Adams has a 40-point game? Do I need anyone on the Eagles?
Sure. So the correlation data would suggest that is a reasonable approach. Adams has, since 2018, only a positive 0.12 correlation with cumulative scoring of the opposing offense. Rodgers has negative 0.267. So when the opposing offense as a whole fails, Rodgers is more likely to succeed. When Rodgers, succeeds, the opposing offense is more likely to fail. When Rodgers fails, the opposing offense is more likely to succeed. So, yeah, I mean, that I guess is a positive sign that this could be a team where you would be more comfortable with that approach than, say, Seattle, where those pieces that you would want to have in Seattle positively correlate with the opposition. So, yeah, I like that approach. We have Green Bay as 5th most likely to score the most points, 7.2%. It's a weird week. So I currently only have 6 teams with a more than 5% chance of scoring the most points. We have doing some quick 13 teams who we're projecting as less than 4% chance of scoring the most points. So there's like a few teams that are kind of in this top, like, loose tier of kind of the most likely teams. And then, I mean, half the teams in this weekend slate just have, a really, really thin odds to score the most points. Green Bay is inside that tier of kind of teams with, more than 5% chance. The Giants.
How about the Raiders? I want to talk about this game. I know you're shaking your head now. The Raiders are my Browns. Like you have the Browns, I have the Raiders.
Yeah.
The Raiders have a 27.25 implied total. It's a 47 total game. They're playing the Jets. Okay, the Jets are horrible. They're the worst team in the league. The Jets have a 19.75 implied total. Now, especially last week with the Raiders completely flopping against the Falcons, I think recency bias is going to hit. Like, who wants to pay up for Waller? Let's see what the health status of Josh Jacobs is, right? People may not want to go there. But then we take a look at, like, Nelson Aguilar or Henry Ruggs. I mean, we've seen teams completely obliterate the Jets. And if the ownership is not going to be there, and also the Raiders don't have a good defense either. So I don't have no problem running it back with a Perriman, Crowder, Mims, one of those guys, Frank Gore even.
Frank Gore.
Right? I seriously, I don't. With the recency bias against the Raiders from last week, like why can't this be the game? Like why? Like the Raiders have to show. I mean, they have a high enough implied total that they have to show up in the plus 5% in your list.
Yeah, we got them at close to an 8%, and yeah, I mean my kind of eye roll is probably indicative of what a lot of the public will be thinking, myself included. Yeah, I mean the Raiders are a team that I feel like I typically like as well, and I don't know, for whatever reason I'm not as into them this week, but yeah, I mean you got a good total. If Josh Jacobs is out, that figures to, I think, help this receiving core a little bit. I think if Josh Jacobs is in, I think it's reasonable for Gruden to just get to a 2-score lead and kind of pound Jacobs. If he's out, I don't know that Devontae Booker is a guy that's just going to be able to like grind down the game for them the way Jacobs could. So yeah, and I mean that stack there from, I think the Raiders used to be a team that we were pretty uncertain as to who we would go with aside from Waller, but I think increasingly Aguilar is kind of separating from the pack of, somewhat volatile receivers who, I don't know, they tend to, be volatile between like total floor and just like, hitting expectation. I mean, none of those guys, Ruggs, Edwards, Renfro, have shown the ability to consistently give you shots at a ceiling game from either one. So yeah, I think Waller, Aguilar, Carr would be the way to go. So these Waller and Carr in particular are guys that have strong positive correlation with the opposition so far this year, plus 0.58 for Carr, plus 0.46 for Waller. So the data would suggest that in games which Carr and Waller have kind of a ceiling performance, the opposition as a whole is able to achieve some sort of above norm, or has a higher likelihood of achieving some above norm kind of cumulative total, and the pieces are cheap enough on the Jet side that you don't need them to put up 30 points for one of like Mims or Perriman or even Crowder has come down a bit in price to get there. So yeah, Mims is the guy I kind of like. I played a good bit of Miami and Mims stacks last week. His usage has been pretty strong, getting a lot of air yards. So maybe you hope one of those big downfield throws pops for him this week. And Jacobs out, Waller, Aguilar, Carr kind of get going. So
The last team I want to talk about is the team that is the biggest favorite on the entire slate. It's the Dolphins.
Yep.
Of all teams, they have a 27 implied total. The Bengals, they're playing in Miami. If Fitzpatrick plays, I'm much more likely to play the Dolphins than if Tua plays. But
definitely.
The Dolphins, I mean, you have Fitzpatrick, you have Parker, you have Gesicki. Now, with the prices on the Bengals side, with Boyd, Bernard, Higgins, and even AJ Green, I mean, he's 31. He's nearly min price. I know you've said that Fitzpatrick doesn't necessarily correlate with the opposing side, but at these prices for the Bengals, you have to expect that they're going to be throwing the ball. They have the lowest implied total. Like it seems weird for me to say that, like, I like the Dolphins and I would want to build the 3+1, but it is the lowest total on the entire slate by 2.5 points. It's 42.5 total. The Dolphins must come up fairly high in team probability, but like, is this it? It seems like I should want to run it back with it seems like the Bengals play in a way where Higgins or Boyd could, if they get one touchdown and they have to throw the ball 45 times, like how does one of them not get there? But then it goes completely against the notion of why am I stacking the 42.5 total game?
Yeah, I think Fitzpatrick playing is kind of a condition that needs to be met for you to really consider the stack. But I'm right there with you. I mean, I in my notes I usually put between 1 and 3 stars next to some of the stacks that I like. This is a weird slate where I don't really have any one stack that is looking like a phenomenal stack, but Miami and Minnesota are the only 2 stacks that I got 2 stars next to. So yeah, I mean they're cheap. Fitzpatrick is kind of a gunslinger. We even saw last week where like Miami just was so far, like there's just no chance they're going to lose. And Fitzpatrick is still slinging TDs to like Adam Shaheen and whatnot. I really like the correlative properties of Parker and Gesicki on our Twitter account. Actually, this morning we posted just some plots of how Gesicki, Parker, and Fitzpatrick's production all relate to one another. And typically we don't see receivers or tight end and receiver have strong positive correlation. I mean, Gesicki and Parker have really good correlation for a receiving pair that has been playing together for a long time. I don't even think you can really cite small sample here. When Parker does well, Gesicki tends to do well as well, and vice versa. And Fitzpatrick fits in there in a really correlative way. So I think it's they have a reasonable total. We have them at 5%, so they're just outside kind of this top tier of teams. There's blowout risk that I don't really know. I don't know. I could see people just not wanting to play the Miami passing side if there's blowout risk. I mean, I think a thing to keep an eye on is if Myles Gaskin comes back. If he is in play and there's really no indication that he's going to be restricted or kind of on a pitch count in any way, I think that would give me a little more concern. Like, he seems like a running back that the Dolphins trust and are more inclined to kind of grind out the game with. If there's no Myles Gaskin, even if Salvon Ahmed comes back, like, he doesn't seem like a guy that team is going to trust to put the game away. And Fitzpatrick has been one of these guys that has been willing to pass and run heavy game scripts. We mentioned at the top of the show, Fitzpatrick has this neutral correlation with opposing offenses. It just means that, like, if Fitzpatrick succeed, it doesn't really change our confidence in any way about the likelihood of the opposition to reach a ceiling. Rodgers with that negative correlation, if Rodgers succeeds, we actually have lower confidence in the opposition. Russ, positive correlation. If he succeeds, the opposition has increased confidence. Fitzpatrick is neutral, so I think the pricing on the Cincinnati side, like Higgins is a guy I look at, Boyd, Green, sure. I think even though it's a low total, the price tags are cheap. There's some good correlation properties. I think it's a spot I'm fairly interested in.
And I think that if Gaskin is activated and with no restrictions, he's
And
going to
he's a great
become
play.
popular. I mean, we have a
Yeah.
slate now where, as it stands, David Montgomery is going to be chalk. Okay, because that's how bad the running back position is.
Yeah.
So if Gaskin's sitting there, it's 5,700, potentially getting 70+% of snaps against the Bengals. Like, to me, yes, yeah, play Gaskin. That's perfectly fine. But that also will lower the ownership of the passing game. Like, if people are jumping on Gaskin, like I jump on Fitzpatrick and Parker. The last game I wanted to talk about, only because it's going to be popular to some extent, is the Rams-Cardinals game. Okay, the Rams are favored only by 3 points now. It's a 48.5 total. Rams 25.75 implied team total. Cardinals 22.75 implied team total. Goff is under 6K. Cup is 6,100. Woods is 5,900. Woods and Cup seem underpriced because they are I believe they're underpriced. I think they're good individual plays. I think the combination, because now they're at 6K, you could double stack them now, right? And you still have Reynolds there at 4,200, so he's reasonably cheap enough. So I think Goff stacks are going to get ownership this week. And then you could obviously run it back with a Hopkins or a Kirk or someone like that. Is it just me, or isn't like one of the highest ceiling quarterbacks on the slate Kyler Murray? And it's just that he's not been playing well the past couple of weeks. If people are going to go with the Goff stack, I know the Cardinals have a 22.75 implied total, but when Kyler Murray can score like 2 touchdowns with his feet, as well as throw for 2 touchdowns, do you think like a more contrarian way to approach this game would be to take the Murray side in a skinny stack, maybe not with Hopkins because he's expensive, with someone like Kirk, and then use Cup and Woods as the run back And the problem is that how did Cup and Woods get there without Goff getting there at 5,800? This is the type of game where the Rams could either run the ball a lot or they could chuck the ball a lot. It really depends on what the game script is. So
Yeah.
if you think this game is competitive, which the spread tends it to be, and there are big plays in this game, I think this is a game that could go significantly over its total, or it's a game that could go significantly under its total. It could be a game where the Rams get out to a 2-touchdown lead and they're just jamming Henderson and Akers and those guys down the Cardinals' throats. And then the clock just starts running out at that point. But with Kyler Murray's ownership coming in at like 4 or 5%, if that, like out of all the quarterbacks on this, I mean, like who has the higher ceiling when it comes to run? I mean, Kyler Murray could rush for 100 yards, and it doesn't seem like people aren't going to play him.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Like
think
I
really
said, it's contrarian. It's not the most probable. I'm
sure,
just
sure.
looking for a way of how can I play Rams wide receivers in a unique way.
Yeah. So yeah, a note on the Murray side. I mean, so are we at all concerned? I mean, Murray had his lowest rush share of the season last week, and he has, really in the past 4 weeks, I wouldn't say has been on the decline aside from really last week, but he hasn't shown in recent weeks like towards the middle of the season. I mean, I see him as getting, 20 plus, even up over 30% of Cardinals rushes when you factor in scrambles. He
Let, let,
hasn't,
let, let
he,
me let me go through. Okay, you're going with a 1 game sample size, right? Okay, I'm
yeah,
looking
no,
at,
no,
at games over the year. 27, 33, 24, 24, 27, 28, 38, 38, 30, 20, 8.9. With
got it.
I understand what you're saying that the trend is going in that direction, but do we take that small sample trend in the case? It's not like Kyler Murray is popular. If he was 10,
Yeah.
11% owned, I'd be like, well, hopefully he's going to be bad again. But I
Hmm.
mean, at 4% owned, I mean, he has rushing totals where he's gaining. He's I mean, he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, he's like 10 plus rushing touchdowns and games of 50, 60 plus rushing yards just this year. Yes, the past 2 games he hasn't rushed much. But who says
Yeah.
they just don't go back to that? This week I'll take a shot at 4% own, and it allows me to play Cup and Woods against him without playing a golf stack.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess I don't have a strong opinion on whether or not Kyler is,
Dust? Is he dust
no,
already? I mean,
no,
come on,
no, no, no,
really?
no, 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 no. The concern there is that it's just he's an expensive quarterback. They have a somewhat low. They have a low total. Like just call it as it is. They have a low total. Um, I think also like his, the well, I think you identified that Hopkins is actually somewhat of an unnatural pair with Murray just because of price, and they haven't correlated well this year. They've had essentially neutral correlation, 0.05, combined ceiling of less than 70 points so far this year. So I guess what I'm saying is I have a less strong, I guess, take or opinion on Murray. I think more clarity on just like if we do go Murray, like what to do. I think, as mentioned, Hopkins plus Murray doesn't make there are reasons why that kind of isn't as sensible of a pair. I think Murray Kirk would be kind of the pair I would target. And they're also, tough to like even, I wouldn't really consider a double stack there. I mean, the weak correlation between Murray Hopkins and then Kirk Hopkins have had strong negative correlation through 9 games. So, uh, I mean, yeah, definitely would be unconventional going Kyler +1 and then 2 receivers brought back on the other side. But I guess, I mean, because of his rushing upside, there are routes to essentially like only Kirk getting there, I'm sorry, Cup and Woods getting there, but somehow Kyler beating Goff. I don't know. To me, it feels like not a super clear route, but definitely not impossible, just given Kyler's rushing ability. And, I guess with Goff, you guys are projecting him to be quite expensive. I'm sorry, quite popular, which, yeah, I do think makes playing his side plus the receivers a little tough. But
Are there any other games that you're looking at that we haven't talked about that
no, I think
are prime for stacking or high in your probability?
no, I think we touched on, the Miami is really kind of the lowest total that I went as far as, teams I've kind of tabbed as being interesting from a stacking standpoint. One note on Chicago and the whole Montgomery thing, I do think Allen Robinson is a strong leverage piece against David Montgomery. He has had really strong negative correlation with Montgomery over the years. And, I do think David Montgomery, if he's going to be 30 to 40% owned, like he's got probably, well, I don't know. His volume is so high. I mean, his likelihood of hitting just like a massive floor relative to price perhaps isn't super high, but he does have, I think, very realistic routes to kind of getting there at best. So if you're building lineups without Montgomery and want to get kind of extra leverage against the lineups that do have Montgomery, do you think Allen Robinson could be a reasonable route to go?
Okay, so at Advanced Sports Analytics, you have a Substack, you have the correlation tools. I mean, we got about 5 weeks left in the season, so make your pitch on why people should go over there and look at this stuff. I mean, we mention all the things that are in the tools that are over there at Advanced Sports Analytics. So if there's something that we haven't mentioned, like go over there and check it out for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of tools around. Well, we have a tool around correlation, which I think is super useful for this show. We also just have good like usage trend tracking tools. We do our own projections, which I think are pretty strong. And yeah, I mean, the notes that I prepare for this show are just totally off of combining stuff from our tools, and we do the Substack every week for the main slate and the two Sunday night and Monday night primetime slates as kind of a way to showcase kind of how maybe the tools can be incorporated into a holistic, roster construction process with regards to, correlation, distributional upside of players, just kind of general like medium projections, while they maybe have somewhat less value when considering tournament lineups. I still think they are a good kind of guiding source for lineup construction. Yeah, we have all that over there, and you can check it out for single month, single week subscriptions. Yeah.
And you can check out our tools here at RotoGrinders, like Lineup HQ, Gridiron IQ, as well as all the premium content with your Core 4 premium subscription. Click on the link in the YouTube subscription, the description, and the subscription. You could subscribe to this. You can hit the thumbs up button if you're here. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Hit whatever you want. So click on that link. You get $5 off your first month of Core 4 RotoGrinders premium membership. So Stuart, so this is going to be the Browns break the slate. Just for you, you're gonna have to you have to play a Browns lineup every week because you don't want to be sitting there and like Mayfield has, maybe it's cheap enough. He could get 30 points and he could be last week he was in the Millie winning he was in the Millie winning lineup. Mayfield Landry.
Was he really?
Yeah.
Mayfield Landry.
Well,
Really?
you didn't. The quarterback didn't matter as much on the last slate, even with Mahomes having a high score. You just needed to get basically Tyreek Hill, Henry, Land. As long as you got all the skill positions in. I mean, the play action winner had Cam Newton, and he had 5 points. So like, the quarterback didn't matter as much. But I'm not sure if I'm going to play the Browns on Sunday. But I don't want to see the Browns be the top stack, and you not. I don't want to. I want to see your name up there.
Yeah, well, no, I mean the kind of thesis behind the Browns in previous weeks has been that they have a reasonable implied total relative to price, and all it takes is a more neutral than expected game script, primarily from production on the other side, aka like James Robinson last week, pushing them to achieve much of that total through the air. I mean, this week they have an exceptionally low total and are at really long odds to score the most points on the
That's why
slate.
you play them. So you can't quit them.
No, I mean,
you had a reason to play them before. Now you don't have a reason to play them, and that's when they're going to hit. That's what that's like gambler's fallacy, right? It's like, oh, they're due, and you missed them on the 1 week where they had the lower total, and they ended up putting up 40 points.
no, I mean, I think there's good literature out there that being due is not a not a real thing.
Well,
And
maybe they're hot. I never know if it's are they hot? Are they due? Because then people are like, well, I can't play this guy because
can't be both.
right, like he's had 4 good weeks. He can't have a 5th good week. And then there are people
Yeah.
like, I've had 4 bad weeks. I got to play him because he's due. So whichever one you want to do, that's perfectly fine with me. But for Stuart Gibson of Advanced Sports Analytics, I'm Jordan Cooper, and this has been the Advanced Sports Analytics Show here on RotoGrinders.com.